I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, the Securities and Exchange Commission says the corruption scandal involving flood control projects has erased 1.7 trillion pesos in market value in just 3 weeks. The Bangko Central's Monetary Board begins its policy meeting at this hour. Will they or won't they cut rates? Our Business World poll shows 10 of the 16 analysts expect a pause at 5%. Our guest is one of the 6 in the minority. Union Bank's Ruben Carlo Asuncion expects a 25 basis point rate cut. He joins us live. And Sharefill ups its financial literacy push as it demands the ICI to make the big fish accountable for corrupt practices. We have an excerpt from my Thought Leaders interview with Sharefill President Dino Bate. The Securities and Exchange Commission warns that corruption has cost the stock market a staggering 1.7 trillion pesos in just 3 weeks. SEC Chair Francis Lim said the flood control scandal has severely shaken investor confidence, describing corruption as a weapon of mass wealth destruction. The Philippine Stock Exchange Index recently plunged to a 6-month low of 5,997, reflecting investor concerns over the flood control project controversy. Lim said the downturn reflects worries over weak integrity rather than fundamentals. The SEC chief also pointed to a broader crisis of confidence, with many firms hesitant to go public and some exiting the stock market altogether. So far, only Cebu-based fuel distributor Topline Business Development Corp has conducted an initial public offering this year, with Maynilad set to debut on November 7th. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department flagged corruption as a pervasive challenge in both the public and private sectors in the Philippines. In its 2025 Investment Climate Report, the agency noted that the country's complex, slow, and sometimes corrupt judicial system inhibits the timely and fair resolution of commercial disputes. The 2024 Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index ranks the Philippines 114th out of the 180 countries, a position it has held since 2019. 33 personalities linked to anomalous flood control projects are now under a lookout bulletin, including ousted congressional leaders Martin Romualdez and Cheese Escudero. Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla yesterday signed the Immigration Lookout Bulletin orders upon the receipt of requests from the Independent Commission for Infrastructure. The ICI came up with a list based on testimonies from DPWH officials and certain contractors. The list includes former and incumbent lawmakers. The ICI has invited former Speaker Martin Romualdez to appear next Tuesday, October 14, to shed light on alleged budget insertions during his time as Speaker, while the Commission issued a subpoena against resigned lawmaker Zaldico, requiring him to appear also next Tuesday.
The powers or the authority of the ICI is to issue subpoena. With regard to contempt powers, then we have to go to follow proper procedure, which is going to the courts and probably file or petition for indirect contempt.
Meanwhile, the BIR has filed a tax liability case against contractors Sara and Curly Vizcaya for their alleged failure to pay over 7 billion pesos in levies from 2018 to 2021. BIR Chief Romeo Lumagi Jr. accused the Vizcayas of not paying income, excise, and documentary stamp taxes.
Tayo na ganito kalaki ang tax liabilities nito at hindi pa tayo tapos dito. Nagsisimula pa lang tayo, yung mga iba pang construction companies ng spouses Vizcaya patuloy pa ang pag-audit. Again, nandito pa lang yung individual liabilities nila. And St. Gerard ang itong sinampa natin at patuloy pa ang pag-audit natin sa mga iba't iba pang korporasyon na mention.
As for the Anti-Money Laundering Council, it has secured its 5th freeze order from the Court of Appeals covering 12 bank accounts. So far, AMLAC was able to freeze 4.4 billion pesos worth of assets, including over 1,600 bank accounts, 160 vehicles, and 40 real properties. The Shareholders Association of the Philippines launches Project Rise, enticing retail investors to take part in the capital markets. This as Sharefill calls on the Marcos administration to make the big fish pay in the anomalous flood control projects. I spoke with Sharefill President Dino Pate and began by asking him what's kept the Philippine stock market from growing like those of its peers in the ASEAN.
I think it's I guess it's also, I guess, I wouldn't really, it's also the difficulty of accessing these investment products. You can just see, during the heydays of crypto, they had about 8 million investors, where we only had about less than a million or even just a million. Why was that so? One, it was easy to open an account. You did not have to go through the difficulty of opening like a regular bank account, which is what we're being asked to do. And so people have to go through that process, and it's a long process. And people are discouraged. I want to do it now. Why is it so difficult? Right? While crypto was, just give me your email and amount, you can participate. That's also one reason why it was also, it's the barrier to get into this type of products and access.
If we peer into your crystal ball, if we can, where do you see the PSEI then by the end of the year?
As I said, if you look at it on a fundamental basis, it should be 7,000, 7,200 even, because of the kind of growth and the kind of valuations that it deserves for such performance. But because of other factors where money goes where there is opportunity, they might think that yes, you have that now, but any hiccup in your economy or any hiccup in your political environment can throw you off track.
So what's the worst case scenario then?
I think it'll just stay where it is. It's bottoming out now. But again, that's also not helping, right? That's not helping. People will say, okay, just call me when it's ready, when the market's great.
You're trying to encourage retail investors, the young, to take a risk. How then do you encourage them to do so in a climate where we don't know where that's going, we can't put a number on it, people still have to be accountable, and we have a huge governance issue in the country?
When you talk about governance, I think it's not in the corporate level. Corporate level, I think that's addressed. All these PLCs are complying to whatever rules that are being given. So I think the governance is more on the government side rather than companies. And companies are able to weather the storm. They just get bigger and bigger because they believe in the potential of this country. I think what people have to understand is that if you look at what these companies are doing today, they're putting their money where their mouth is. Either they're buying back their shares, either they're increasing their capex. You can see that they see the potential.
Catch my full interview on Long Conversation Thought Leaders on October 16, Thursday, only here on One News Channel. The Bangko Central's Monetary Board begins its policy meeting right this moment at a critical juncture for the country's economy. As negative perceptions fester, fueled by corruption allegations in government, analysts remain divided. Will rising inflation and recent typhoon-driven price pressures keep Governor Eli Remolona and the Monetary Board from cutting this round? Or will the prospect of even slower growth, led by subdued investments, tariff pressures, force them to slash rates again? Mark Angeles of First Metro Securities told this program he'd rather the Monetary Board wait it out.
Well, I think the BSP has room to cut. However, given the current macro scenario, I think they can wait a little bit, pause this round, and maybe resume cutting sometime next meeting, especially once there's some clarity on what the Fed is going to do.
Of the 16 Business World surveyed, 10 said the Bangko Central will keep rates on hold. The remaining 6 think otherwise. Let's check in on one of them, Ruben Carlo Asuncion, the chief economist at Union Bank, the one you see encircled on that screen. Good seeing you again. Carlo, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Cathy.
All right, so what makes you think a 25 bips cut will come later today?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk of sentiment, but we have to really look at the numbers very well. In our nowcast for third quarter GDP, we yielded a range of 4 to 4.8% for third quarter. That's preliminary. I have to stress that. No, so but we think it was coming from the fact that there were two-digit declines both in July and August for NG disbursements. NG disbursements, those are coming from line agencies. We believe that that's where also infrastructure spending is included. And if you're going to look at it from the second quarter, it's about 1.3% growth. So a two-digit, that could really weigh on fiscal spending for third quarter. So we're really looking at that, and that might be a factor that the BSP will look at. Aside from the fact that we have inflation coming in at lower than expected. I think the market was expecting 1.9. We were expecting 2. So at 1.7, at 1.7 average so far, I think those are two compelling reasons for you to cut.
But
Why wait?
Yeah, there's the unemployment rate as well. I mean, the Business World survey that we just showed took place before those inflation results came out. As you say, it's faster than the previous month, but still below the Bangko Central's target range of between 2 and 4%. But then there is the unemployment rate that also fell and eased to 3.9%. So what do you think would be the compelling reason to cut still, despite these good results, apart from what you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think for the unemployment, yes, it eased a bit if you're going to compare it with July. But of course, you're comparing oranges to apples, as even the undersecretary said. No, so you have to compare that with a year ago at 4. It's still a slight decline, but it's not. I would say it's not a compelling reason for you to look at and say that let's just stay and not move. But yeah, of course it's still them, it's still their choice. But we think that there is really an opening for the BSP to cut now,
Well,
rather than waiting for December.
If Mark Angeles were to have his way, I had him on the show yesterday. He said that I'd rather you wait, because third quarter GDP figures are out November 7th, and that could be a compelling enough data for the Monetary Board to wait on before making a move again.
Yeah, they can wait for official numbers, but I'm sure they do have their own measures. Looking at I know that they have their own nowcast figures, and looking at where the GDP is actually coming into. So, well, for us, that's one of the reasons why we think that we should cut already. So that we're looking at the potential downside to third quarter GDP.
If you were looking at a potential downside for GDP, then why didn't you cut your GDP forecast? As I understand, it's still at 5.5% this year and 5.7% next year, despite the widening corruption scandal.
Yeah, we were actually ahead of everyone. We were already at sub 6 even before, I think, the start of the year. No, so I think we felt that it's not yet. We're just waiting as well for the official data to come out and see where we go from there.
There's another data point. The governor himself confirmed this when I spoke to him 2 weeks ago. Eli Remolona said that he was looking at output. He was monitoring that, and out came the numbers, and it came below 50. That signaled a contraction for the first time since March. So how much weight do you think that might carry as they meet today?
Yeah, well, that's another reason to look into. That's, I think, 49.9. That's already a contraction area for manufacturing. So that's something that you really have to consider as well, aside from the fiscal spending challenges that third quarter has been facing.
Yeah, but when I spoke to him, the peso hadn't fallen yet to 58. Now it has, but bounced back, pulling back from an 8-month weakness versus the dollar this week. With the peso at 58, do you think that that peso weakness would weigh heavily in the Monetary Board's decision today?
Well, I haven't heard of any intervention lately, at least none that I know of. So I think they're quite comfortable with having it at 58, 57.50 to 58.30 at that. So I think I mean, by just reading it, I think they're very comfortable with it at this point.
Okay, just as a final point, if they don't make a move today, how is that going to change all your forecasts?
Yeah, we'll still wait and see. No, I think the third quarter GDP is very important at this point. So, yeah, that's where we are.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us in the final few hours before the decision is made. Ruben Cardo Asuncion of Union Bank. And you're watching Money Talks. Coming up, a coming together of master weavers, artisans, and heritage brands from all over the Philippines at the Dikang Habi Market Fair. Undersecretary Ali Atienza of the Philippine Fiber Industry Development Authority joins us live when we return. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Tech stocks rebounded Wednesday in the U.S., lifting most of the U.S. indexes. The Nasdaq climbed by over 1.1%, its 32nd record of the year, while the S&P 500 jumped by over 0.5%, posting an all-time high for the 33rd time this year. The Dow was virtually flat, shedding by a single point. The benchmark 10-year Treasury yield slightly rose to 4.128%, and gold prices another record high, rising to $4,043 per troy ounce. Silver is also nearing shattering records at 45-year highs, closing yesterday at $48.65 per troy ounce. U.S. futures pointing to slight gains when the markets open later tonight Manila time. The Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq all up by 0.1% each in after-hours trading. And Asian markets jump in the first hour of trading this Thursday. South Korea's Kospi advancing 2.7%, Japan's Nikkei 225 rising by 1.3%, and Australia's ASX 200 climbs by 0.33%. Let's take a quick check on our own markets just ahead of the Bangko Central's decision on rates. PSEI opens this Thursday slightly higher, 6,105. The stock market rose yesterday by 0.25%, with investors buoyed by the decline in August's unemployment rate. In addition, investors were still digesting September's inflation print, which could support another 25 basis point rate cut. The broader all-shares index gained by 0.33%, with sectoral gauges mostly in the green. Let's take a look at the Philippine peso. Opens today slightly higher and stronger at 57.875 to the dollar. Peso closed yesterday a tad stronger at 57.95 against the greenback. And the 10-year government bond yields have ticked down to 6.047% from the previous close of 6.064%. Tariff pressure measures are straining the Philippine fiber industry's prospects and keeping competitive overseas. The industry supports about 2 million Filipinos and dominates global abaca supply, with exports generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually. This year's 2025 Likhang Habi endeavors to support farmers, mitigating the negative impact of Trump's 19% tariffs on abaca exports to the U.S. Well, with us now for more is Undersecretary Ali Atienza, the Executive Director of the Philippine Fiber Industry Development Authority, or PhilFIDA. Good to see you, Yusek Ali. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Miss Cathy, and to everyone who's watching, good morning po.
Okay, so how is the Kanghabi coming along? It is still open till Sunday.
Yes, actually, I'm very excited about it because this group, HABI, the Philippine Textile Council, has been very active ever since. In fact, they've been there for decades already, and it shows like how they love the country, how they love Philippine fiber. And the reason why I took this job also is because I see the potential of our Philippine fibers, especially abaca, which is endemic to the Philippines. And we all know the whole world is looking at sustainability, biodegradable products, and this is what we have. Abaca, for example, is a type of plant that the more you cut, the more it grows. So which means ito yung pinaka-sustainable among all.
It is indeed a really exciting time, but it is as well as perilous because when we talk exports, then we have to worry about the tariffs that have come into effect. 19% of all the abaca exports, the value-added abaca exports going to the U.S., now feeling that pinch. Do you have any metrics as to how the impact had been so far since it came into effect last August?
Well, of course, in terms of exports, we've been going down for the past decades, no? And but then again, we do have a demand both locally and internationally. Let me just say that the problem here is we have more than enough raw material in the Philippines. The whole eastern border of the Philippines has abaca, and we do have the demand, like such as a tropical fabric law. But of course, a majority of Filipinos or government officials are still using clothing from Shopee and Lazada, which is from China. However, we are really pushing hard to use all this from Philippine abaca to cotton to pineapple. For us, what we need is to process it in the country. And that's exactly what we're trying to do now with PhilFIDA.
Okay, talk to us about processing because that means supply chains. I mean, you got to fix that and make sure that we actually process the material to export them value added because that gives us a lot more revenues and also help the farmers in turn.
Correct. Actually, I agree with you on that. Of course, in terms of processing, there is a bit of a problem. But let me just say, maybe by end of the year or early next year, we will be adding abaca to our plastics. Since we are importing about 600,000 metric tons of plastic, if we add 20% of that, then we can triple our production already for abaca.
For what use, though? I mean, that's interesting. You're using plastic to even exponentially grow abaca and its use. Could you talk to us about the demand then? You said demand here was growing as well as internationally, but where and how?
Well, number one is actually Europe. Of course, Japan still uses our money, our abaca for their money. On one side, I guess we're pushing now for a local, for the local demand because apparently a lot of textile makers, furniture makers, they do want to use abaca, but they don't know where to go, where to buy it. And that's exactly what we're doing now. Soon, actually by next year, we will have an application wherein we will tap the local market to other buyers, not just locally, but internationally.
Which brings us to the Lazadas and the Shopees. You said that that's the problem. They're not buying abaca because they're not on those platforms. What is PhilFIDA now doing to actually bring them to the online platform to make sure that they can go global?
Correct. We are actually, since I arrived, I was able to fix our ISSP. That's an ICT platform. And by next year, we will have a budget for it, which means we can start developing the application wherein we can connect from farmers to processors, and of course, not just in the Philippines, but to the whole world.
Okay, so in the meantime, what do we do then? Do we pivot towards the European market? I mean, what sort of maybe a ratio you're looking at? Because right now it's really all going to the U.S. and it's being slapped 19% of tariffs.
Well, the U.S. is not just the only country that we're actually sending our abaca, no? And actually most of it is going to Europe, Japan, China, and other countries. And like I said, no, we cannot rely on just international market. What we need is actually to have a domestic, to be able to fix our domestic needs for our Philippine fiber.
And if we do fix our domestic needs, what can this market present to the farmers, apart from the overseas market? How much of an opportunity can they have here?
Actually, what we've been doing now is really connecting the farmers directly to the processors. There's a new program that we're doing. It's called Adopt a Farm, which means because our farmers are earning so little. I mean, from 2,500 to 3,500 a month. That's inhumane. And what we're doing now is connecting all these processors, both local and international, directly to the farmers, so they can give them a salary or at least be able to actually sustain their lives and their families.
So what could be the best case then if 3,500 is inhumane a month? How much can farmers earn if we do fix our processes here?
Well, we're looking now at least doubling it first. Of course, it's still minimum, well, less than minimum. But at the end of the day, if we get to fix processing of all these fibers into finished goods, I think we will be able to give them a better lives, please.
Okay, so we have about a minute. What can viewers and streamers expect then if they indeed make a run for Habi, as it's on till Sunday, I believe, in Makati?
Yes, actually, I'm congratulating Habi, because they've been very active about it, and I'm inviting everyone. Let's go to One Ayala in Makati, and let's see, all these products. Because what I see here is also like this farmer should actually be able to do all these products also. No? I mean, we used to learn crochets back in the day. Of course, a lot of people don't know that anymore, but. Philfida has been very active now. All the regions are actually going around. Of course, we do not have the manpower to be able to reach everyone, but we are actually recording everything. So soon it will be out in the internet. Again, let me invite everyone to Likang Habi, because they have been very active and they do have really, really nice products that I think Filipinos should see.
Indeed, and we've seen them in pictures in what we just showed there a couple of moments ago. Thank you so much and all the best. Yusek Ali Atienza of Philfida.
Thank you, Ms. Cathy.
And before we go, the Management Association of the Philippines has named Han Si, the chair of SM Prime Holdings, as the MAP Management Person of the Year. Si was recognized for his commitment to sustainable urban development, social inclusion, and good governance, as well as his people-centered leadership that prioritizes employee welfare and professional growth. MAP said the conferment of the award would be held on November 24. Congratulations, Hans. That is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. We're also streamed live on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. Have a great day ahead.